I could still hear my husband's laughter in the living room, his steady footsteps, down the hallway, and his voice calling my name. But the silence had become deafening at night since he died 2 years ago. I would lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, wondering if this was how the stuff my life would feel. Empty, quiet, and incredibly lonely. I made every effort to keep myself occupied by cooking, gardening, and serving at the church. But there was only so much I could do to take my mind off the pain within when a moving truck pulled up 2 houses down the street. I noticed a black family, unloading boxes and furniture, talking and laughing as they settled into their new home. It was common for people to come and go in our neighborhood, but something about them in particular caught my attention. He must have been in his early 20s, tall with broad shoulders and a body that looked like it belonged to a professional athlete. His dark skin glistened in the sun as he carried heavy furniture with ease, his muscles rippling. With every movement, I pretended to dust the blinds, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. I had an unaccustomed rush of intustation and remorse that I hadn't felt in years. Looking at a man half my age made me wonder what type of woman I was, always. Outside, whether mowing a lawn, washing his car, or throwing a football, around his energy was contagious, and his laughter reverberated through the fence like a song I didn't know I needed to hear. One evening, while I was watering my front yard, I noticed Tim strolling down the street with edible bag slung over his shoulder. He nodded and smiled at me, which was a courteous gesture, but it sent a shockwave through me. "Good evening, ma'am," he said in a deep, warm voice. I blinked, surprised that he'd spoken. To me, I was unable to speak, and my cheeks turned red. He paused. Andre positioned the bag on his shoulder, saying, "If you ever need help around the house, just let me know." I was unsure of how to react, but I said, "Thank you. Darius, that's very kind of you." Thereist of the night, I couldn't stop. Thinking about our brief encounter, his kindness, his confidence, and the way he carried himself, it was as though he had rekindled something inside of me that I'd assumed had died with my husband. "Margaret," he said, giving me another one of those disarming smiles before heading back down the street. I was looking out the window again. The following morning, Darius was mowing the lawn shirtless, and this time his body was glistening with sweat. I felt my breath catch as I watched him, my hands gripping the windowsill. I tried to force the thoughts out of my head, telling myself that it was wrong to feel this way. But no matter how hard I tried, the curiosity was already sparked that evening as I was returning from the mailbox. Darius waved at me from his driveway. "Hey, Margaret," he called out my pulse thumping. I waved back and smiled, approaching him to ask how he was doing. I answered, "Just taking it one day at a time," and he nodded, his looks softening. "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm just down the street," he said, leaning casually against his car, a knot formed in my throat. How was he where I felt alone? Was that all it's owed? "Thank you very much, Darius." As he made my way back home, I could help but feel a flicker of something I hadn't experienced in years, perhaps. Life wasn't finished surprising me yet. Or perhaps my narrative had captured your attention. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more engaging and dramatic tales. I didn't know when it started, the strange habit of mine. Every morning, I'd find myself standing by the window with my coffee in hand, pretending to enjoy the view, but my eyes were always searching for him. Darius, it was as if by the day didn't truly begin. Until I saw him some mornings. He'd be jogging, his tall frame cutting through the crisp air with EA soother. Times he'd be working on his car, his muscles flexing as he tinkered under the hood. I tried to convince myself it was harmless, just an old widow finding a bit of joy in watching the vibrancy of youth. But deep down, I knew it was something more. In the neighborhood, barbecue was the perfect excuse to see him up close, again every summer. Mrs. Clark from 2 streets over hosted a gathering in her sprawling backyard, usually went out of obligation. But this time I found myself looking forward to it. Was thick with the smell of grilled burgers and ribs. Children ran around laughing, and neighbors mingled, exchanging politesse small talk. I arrived with my potato salad, scanning the crowd for a familiar face, and then I saw him. Darius was standing by the grill with a plate in hand, laughing at something one of them had said. He looked so at ease, so confident when his eyes met. Mine smiled and waved. "Margaret," he called out, making his way toward me. "Hello, Darius." He joked, his smile growing, and I couldn't help but laugh. "Well, I do my best," I murmured, trembling a little. "I'm glad you came. This party needed some class." His voice trailed down to a conspiratorial whisper. "Between you and me, the potato salad here is always awful." He came closer. He asked, gesturing to the stack of cups on the counter. "I think I've got it, but thank you." Although I was acutely aware of how close he was, standing here asked for a cup anyway, and our fingers briefly touched, sending Ashok through, I quickly be-eyed myself with pouring the tea. "You know," he said, in a tone that was softer now, "I'm hoping yours can save the day." I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "You'll have to let me know what you think," he said, with a tone that was commanding yet comforting. "You seem genuine now, which sets you apart from the others in this area." He turned to face him, taken aback by the earnestness in his voice. "Isn't that a kind way of stating I don't belong?" He shook his head and laughed. "No, it's a compliment. You're sincere. It's refreshing," he said. Before I could reply, someone from the yard called his name, and he gave me a quick look before leaving me alone with embarrassing thoughts. After that night, I noticed that I was observing him more frequently, my eyes lingering a bit too long when he waved at me from his driveway. I would get a flutter in my chest that I hadn't experienced since I was younger. One afternoon I was reading a book on my porch when he passed by with his dog. He stopped at the base of my feet and wiped the perspiration from his brow. I closed my book and said, "Hey, Margaret." And he lashed that irresistible smile. "Your porch is looking nice." "Thank you, just trying to keep busy if you ever need help with anything around the house." "Just say the word again," I said hesitantly. "My faucet has been leaking in the kitchen, and I've been meaning to call a plumber, but I can take a look at it." "I'm pretty handy with that stuff," he said. I was hesitant to invite him into my home because I knew that doing so would be crossing some unspoken line, but his earnest expression disarmed me. "That's really nice of you." Darius, the following day, he came over with a toolbox, and I watched him work in my kitchen. His big hands expertly repairing the faucet. I felt a range of emotions I couldn't quite put into words, including admiration, gratitude, and something deep that I wasn't ready to acknowledge. He stood up and wiped his hands on a rag. "Looking like new." "Thank you," I said, a little out of breath. "Without you, I'm not sure what I would have done." I stood by the window as he left, watching him walk down the street with his broad shoulders lit by the setting sun. For the first time in years, I felt scared and alive. It had been a week since Darius fixed my faucet, but I could still clearly remember him standing in my kitchen. He looked at me. Then his dark eyes met mine with an intensity that made my heart race. Any time Margaret on me in it, I replayed our conversations. It Caesar's smile, the way his voice seemed, tolling her in the air long after he left it. To myself it was harmless, a silly crush, a distraction for my loneliness. But deep down I knew it was more. The next time I saw him, it was late the afternoon. I was pruning the rose bushes in my backyard when he appeared at the fence holding a cold drink in his hand. "Hey, Margaret," he called out, leaning casually against the wooden slats. Looked up, startled but pleased to see him. "Darius, how are you?" "Good." "I just finished a workout," he said, gesturing to his damp shirt. "Well, hello," I said, with a small laugh, brushing my hands against my gardening gloves. "You've been working hard," he grinned. "Yeah, trying to stay in shape, you know how it is." I nodded, though I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly perfect he looked even in the heat. "You're putting the rest of us to shame," I teased. He chuckled and tilted his head toward the house. "Do you need help with anything? Else I don't mind pitching in." I hesitated, my heart pounding at the thought of him coming inside again. "Actually, I was thinking about rearranging some furniture, but it's probably too heavy for me." "Say no more," he said, setting down his drink. "I'll be right over." Before I could protest, he was walking around to the front of the house. Moments later, he was standing in my living room, his presence filling the space in a way that felt both comforting and overwhelming. "What do you need? Moved?" asked. Rolling up his sleeves, I pointed to the couch and a few other pieces, explaining how I wanted to open up the space. He nodded and got to work lifting the furniture with ease. I stood back watching him, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and desire. When he finished, he turned to me, slightly out of breath. "How's that perfect?" I said, my voice softer than I intended. "Thank you, Darius, you've been such a help." He smiled, his eyes meeting mine for a moment. Neither of us said anything. The air between us felt charged, like something unspoken was hanging there waiting to be acknowledged. "Margaret," he said, his voice low, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, though my heart was racing. "Why do you look at me like that?" I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, his gaze intense but gentle. "You know what I mean. You look at me like you see something in me that no one else does." I opened my mouth to respond, but now words came out. The truth was, he was right. I did see something in him. Kindness, strength. A spark that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. "I don't mean to make you uncomfortable," he continued, his voice softening, "but I feel it too." My heart was pounding so loudly I thought he might hear it. Darius sighed, but before I could finish, he reached out and gently took His hand was warm, steady and reassuring. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know for a moment I was paralyzed by fear and doubt. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was a widow old enough to be his mother." But as I looked into his eyes, I felt a pulse stronger than any logic or judgment without. Thinking, I closed the distance between us. Our lips met in a hesitant, tender kiss that quickly deepened, breaking the barriers I had so carefully constructed. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me close, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. When we finally pulled apart, I searched his face for regret or hesitation, but all I saw was warmth. "Margaret," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you don't have to be alone." Any tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them away. "This feels crazy," I admitted. "Maybe," he said with a soft smile, "but sometimes crazy." I said, "Exactly what we need." The days that followed were a whirlwind of stolen moments and whispered confessions. We met in secret, careful not to draw attention. Every touch, every kiss felt like a lifeline, pulling me out of the emptiness I'd been drowning in for so long. But it couldn't last forever. One evening, as we were sitting on my porch, a neighbor walked by and paused, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of us together. "Evening, Margaret," she said, her tone dripping with suspicion. "Good evening, Mrs. Clark," I replied, forcing a smile. She glanced at Darius, then back at me. "Well, isn't this cozy?" she said before walking away. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. "What if people start talking? Let them," he said firmly, taking my hand. "What we have is real, Margaret. That's all that matters." His words gave me comfort, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The days following Mrs. Clark's pointed remark were tense. I couldn't shake the feeling that my neighbors were watching, whispering. It was as though the walls of my safe little world had been breached, and I wasn't sure how to rebuild them. Darius seemed unfazed. He continued, coming over his presence, a steady comfort in the storm of my thoughts. But I was growing restless, the weight of our secret becoming harder to bear. One afternoon we were sitting in my living room. The blinds were drawn, the room dimly lit, as if the secrecy of our relationship demanded it. "Darius, what if this gets out?" I asked, my voice trembling. He reached for my hand, his touch grounding me. "Why do you care what people think, Margaret? We not doing anything wrong. This, not that." "Simple," I said, pulling my hand away. "You're young, strong and full of life. People will judge you for being with someone like me, and I don't care," he said firmly. "You make me happy. That's all that matters." His words were like a balm, soothing the doubts that threatened to consume me. But deep down, I knew the world wouldn't see it that way. A week later, everything came crashing down. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was standing in the kitchen baking a pie. The radio played softly in the background, and for the first time in days I felt my way, sense of peace. Then there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I found Mrs. Clark standing on my porch. Her arms crossed, and a look of barely contained judgment. On her face, Margaret. She began, her tone sharp. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, my heart sinking. She walked into the living room and glanced around here, yes, landing on the coffee mug Darius had left on the table. "I've been hearing things," she said, turning to face me, about you and that young man. Darius has swallowed hard the pie. "Forgotten, Mrs. Clark. I don't think this is any of your business." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, but this is a small community, Margaret. People talk, they're concerned about appearances." I felt a surge of anger rises within me. "Appearances, is that what this is about? You don't care about me or Darius. I just want something to gossip about." Her eyes narrowed. "You're making a fool of yourself, Margaret, and of him you think this will, and well, you're living in a fantasy." Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much they hurt. "Please leave," I said, my voice shaking. She stared at me for a moment before turning and walking out the door. That night I couldn't sleep. Her words played in my mind, each one a dagger to my already fragile confidence. The next day I told Darius we needed to talk. He came over after work, his face lighting up when he saw me. But his smile faded when he noticed the look on "What's wrong, Hest?" stepping inside. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Darius, I don't think we can keep doing this." The expression darkened. "What are you talking about?" "It's too much," I said, my words stumbling out in a rush. "The neighbors, the judgment, the whispers. I can't live like this." He reached for me, but I stepped back, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Margaret, don't do this. Don't let them win." "It's not about them," I lied. "It's about me. I'm not strong enough for this, Darius. I'm sorry." He stared at me, in hurt and disbelief etched on his face. "So, that's it. You're just giving up." I couldn't answer. Instead, I turned away, wobbled to meet his eyes. For days it stayed inside, the weight of my decision, crushing me. The house felt emptier than every room, a painful reminder of what I'd lost. Then one evening there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I found Darius standing there, a determined look on his face. "I'm not giving up on us," he said, stepping inside Darius. No, he interrupted. "Listen to me. I know you're scared, and I get it, but you can't let fear control your life. You deserve to be happy." Margaret, we both caught his words, broke something inside me, the walls, and so carefully built, crumbling under the weight of his love. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know," he said, pulling me into his arms, "but we'll face it together in that moment." I knew I couldn't walk away from him, no matter what the world thought. He was worth the risk, the whispers, the judgment. We decided to stop. Hiding people wanted to talk, let them, for the first time in years. I felt free and burdened by the weight of others' expectations. Our love wasn't conventional or easy, but it was real, and in the end, that was all that